And we're going to discuss whether Article 4 is a good thing or a bad thing. Pure basic level, if you just have a 200 quid, what's 200 quid a year? That's 2,400 in a year. And you add a zero to that, and quite quickly, you've added £24,000. And that's a room. And then when you times that by 5, 6, however many you do, that can add up to 100, 120,000 on your NGDV, which makes all the difference with recycling your cash. There's a 5-year model in my view. The secret of my 5-year model is you have a certain amount of cash and you can invest in an HMO with that cash. And if you get the right HMOs and do it right, and this is where you've got to probably go slightly bigger to get a slightly bigger variation in price so you can recycle your money, but also get a cash flow, is that you could recycle that round several times. And if you're quick enough, after 5 years, I've calculated, I've done the model, which is, let's say you had 500k to start off with. You can have 500k back in your bank plus a 500k a year income.
Wow.
After 5 years. Well, welcome to the Property Business Accelerator podcast. I'm here again with my broker, Bruce Mainwaring from Bond Finance. And today we're going to talk through HMOs and really what affects valuations, Article 4, the core meaty bits that you really need to understand to get your HMO valuation correct, because so many people come to me and also I know go to Bruce with, I haven't got what I wanted and don't understand why. So we're going to talk about some things that heavily influence HMOs and financing them, and particularly commercially financing them at the back end. So we thought we'd kick off with a topic around Article 4. So I'd like to understand the finance implications of Article 4. And we're going to discuss whether Article 4 is a good thing or a bad thing. So Bruce is now going to talk through. So Bruce, if you can explain how Article 4 impacts mortgage finance.
Well, we sort of need to take one step back first and then go forward. See, you have a house, it's got C3 planning. And under PD, you can convert it to up to 6 people HMO, and that automatically gets C4 planning. Now, that planning is under PD, so it's interchangeable. And that is the biggest problem with any valuation, is that PD. What is the valuer valuing? Is it a C3 property or is it a C4 property? And it causes lots of confusions. Now, the great thing about Article 4 is that Article 4 kills off that PD. So it can only ever be sold as and used, I always talk about usage, only be used as an HMO. Therefore, it warrants an investment-led valuation where you use the rent of the property and you capitalise that using a yield, and that gives you your NGDV. Now, what you generally find, as a general rule of thumb, that outside London, yield-based valuations will be higher than bricks and mortar valuations, and vice versa. In London, you're generally going to get bricks and mortar valuations higher than yields.
Okay. So, obviously a known strategy to a lot of property investors is obviously buy a house, a C3 house, turn it into an HMO. People are loving the ensuites these days. And the reason for that, obviously, is because that impacts the valuation. Because as you say, the valuation is dictated by the rent roll. So anything you can do to increase the rent roll increases the end value of the HMO.
Spot on. And I love your pot noodle stations. Yeah, your little benchy thing with a little bowl sink, a couple of power sockets, and a fridge. Costs you what, £500-600 to put in?
Yeah, it's not too expensive.
It's not too expensive, but you can charge an extra £25-50 a room. And when you annualise that, you're actually increasing the value of that room by 5-6 grand. Do that 6 times. You created 36 grand's worth of equity, but it's only cost you £3,000. No brainer. Same with ensuites.
Yes.
Ensuite, prices have probably gone up now. What, 2.5-3 grand of ensuite?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, 3 to 5 these days. But yeah.
Okay, so and then you can charge an extra £75, £100.
£100. Yeah. 100, 120, 150, depending on the area they're in.
Yeah.
And then you couple that up with the pot noodle station. Suddenly it's like 200 quid.
Yeah.
200 quid's worth a lot. I always look at it like at a pure basic level. If you just have a 200 quid, what's 200 quid a year? That's 2,400 in a year. And you add a zero to that, and quite quickly you've added £24,000, and that's a room. And then when you times that by 5, 6, however many you do, that can add up to 100, 120,000 on your NGDV, which makes all the difference with recycling your cash. So that is a key implication. But if you start going down that route, though, you have to be a little bit careful, don't you? Because not every lender is going to like a pot noodle station.
Correct.
Or not every lender likes a ensuite even downstairs. There's certain valuers, aren't there?
Connells will give you a nil valuation if you've got an ensuite downstairs in the lounge.
So it's really important to understand the lender. And I find, again, the reason people come, and we've been talking to someone today, it wasn't HMOs, but it was like, obviously, the people didn't understand how the valuers were going to value the building.
Correct.
And one of the core things with HMO finance is to understand how the valuer is going to value the building, because you'd get a big surprise when you get a zero value. And I've come across it. Obviously, you've come across it loads. Yeah. Someone's panicking, going, how do I get off this bridge? So maybe there's an element of like, okay, if you're trying to do like a C3 to a C4, refinance back out, hopefully get a lot of your initial investment back out, what is the process for that? What is the actual kind of like sequence of events when it comes to the financing side of it that you need to follow? Because I think some people get that wrong. They don't necessarily maybe think of the back end, or haven't secured the back end properly, or got the wrong bridging, or what. Yeah, there's some mistakes along the way.
Yeah, and that's mainly because they're using bridges which use method as a valuer.
Okay.
I personally like using VAS and the bridges or refurb funders which use VAS, because then I can use VAS again on the exit. And to have that continuity, that you got that line in the sand, my favourite word, Mike, okay, I'm sorry, that you get the line in the sand at the beginning of the deal, and what we sort of project what the end value is going to be. If you use the same valuer, even though you're using two different mortgage companies, funders, let's call them funders, that will reduce your variance. Okay, and the case today was method, and then going on to appraisers or VAS. So you're using two different panelled valuers, and that's when you get different outcomes, and they're the outcomes that clients do not want. And it's always good just to get it all set out. And because the majority of the term funders use VAS, try and use a refurb funder which uses VAS on the way in. Therefore, you've got that continuity. Okay.
And then I guess potentially you're trying to get the same person back in.
Correct.
So, because you understand what they're going to give you. I mean, I find they are a bit conservative to start off with, and then you sometimes, because a lot of people love to do these amazing HMOs these days. And then they get a slightly better valuation at the back end, because people can see and visualize and actually see what you've done and the standard. But obviously that continuity avoids some of those issues that you're talking about. And I don't think everyone thinks all of those little details through. I think a lot of people just pick up like things of like, oh yeah, I'll just get a commercial valuation at the back end, and they don't fully understand what that means. And there's a slight nuance of lenders and things, and a broker will come along and say, oh, I had one the other day. In fact, one of our events, we had someone say, well, yeah, I had a Paragon mortgage, and it came back 60 grand or 100 grand less than I was expecting. And I always go, that doesn't surprise me. They kind of do value commercially, but they have a lower kind of level of commercials than others. And in fact, you've done a test. So tell me about a test that I know that you've done around testing, say, Paragon, who, if you want a good cash flow, because they do have good loans.
Awesome rates. Paragon are great
rates. And that's why people go for them. Yeah. So it's understandable. But if your objective is to recycle your cash, they're probably not going to be the lender to do it.
Correct.
So there is a trade-off. Obviously, the more you borrow, the less the cash flow, but also quite often the ones that give you the better values also have the highest rates. So you've got to go into your eyes open and realise the choices that you're making. But just tell me about what you did once, I think with one of your clients, around comparing valuations.
Yeah.
And I know we certainly also did something, but let's go through that first.
So in the last 18 months, there's a new buzzword going around. The term is over-adapted, okay? And this refers to non-Article 4 six-bed, six-ensuite properties, which can never be sold as single dwellings. They're over-adapted. No one in their right mind is going to move in to a house with 6 beds, 6 ensuites, and 1 kitchen.
That's because they got the ensuites downstairs that you're not going to want an ensuite on your lounge, are you?
Yeah.
Well, some people do if they're watching the sport with the beer.
Exactly.
They might find it quite handy. But essentially, Connells would say zero value. But anyway.
Correct. So VAS will allow me to instruct a long-form valuation on an over-adapted property. Now, the gold standard is 6 beds, 6 ensuites. Now, I can get 5 beds, 5 ensuites through if it's next door to commercial, like Quick Fit, because no one ever wants to. It's all about.
What happens if it's a pub or something?
Or pub, a pub, something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's something commercial, something which will put someone off buying that building as a C3. Okay,
but is there worry that because this whole thing around, and I think that's been a big shift in the market recently is. Initially it was like, well, if I get 6 beds, 6 ensuite, will I get? Oh, I think 6 beds, I can get it commercially valued, and there was no Article 4. But what you're saying now is it's really quite a rule now.
Yeah.
It's like a black and white rule that 6 beds, 6 ensuites, over adapted, quite clearly an HMO, quite clearly a big investment.
Yeah,
and investors are going to pour over it because they want something ready made, ready set up. It's got a good income, so they're going to go and buy it. But
exactly. So that's where I'm advising. When I'm speaking to clients and they're looking at deals and stuff like that, I'm trying to, and they want to recycle their methodology is trying to recycle the money. And as you say, it's about the momentum of the same amount of recycling, the same amount of money over and over again to grow a portfolio. I always push them to go to, that's a very small 5 bed. You can't really do much. What about that one over there? If we're looking at deals, I will push towards the 6 bed, 6 ensuites if they're looking to recycle. Now, getting back to your point earlier, I had an engineer, okay? He's a detailed person. He loves stripping things apart and putting things back together because that's his job, okay? And very successful as a portfolio landlord.
Yeah.
And we were looking in Manchester, certain postcode, and he did 6 beds, 6 ensuites, and Paragon at the time had free valuation service. So we submitted a case to Paragon, and he got a free valuation. It cost £199 admin fee, and that's it. And he was happy to pay that £200 admin fee just to find out what is a Paragon's valuation versus a VAS-based valuation. And we were pretty shocked.
What was the difference? Come on, tell me what the difference was.
320 Paragon, 380 VAS. That's £60,000 difference. 75% of that is £45,000. So you're recycling an extra £45,000 back out just by using the correct valuation firm. Now, people always talk about what lenders you use. No, you need to talk about what valuation panels you want to use.
Okay, so it's the actual valuers and the company and the panel they belong because that's where the methodology sits in a way.
And you reverse engineer.
Yeah.
Okay. I look at what we're trying to create, what we're trying to do, and then look at the valuation part of it, and then reverse engineer which lenders I'm going to use.
Yeah.
If you've got a mature HMO, which has been going for some time, and you don't want to release money out, you just want to get the best rates, you go to Paragon. It's a no-brainer. Fantastic rates. But if you're building a portfolio and you want to recycle that same money over the same momentum of the same cash you've only got. Because we all don't have a magic money tree, do we? We do.
No.
We need to get as much money out as possible to go again. And the more money you leave in, the harder it is to go again. So you have to be careful when you're building. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always say to people, at the building stage, take as much money as you can out of it. And then you keep building, you keep building, you keep building. You get to a stage where you're starting to look at cash flow. You're starting to look at, so maybe you don't need so much money. But I always say, and I do this for investors now, is like there's a 5-year model in my view, and the secret of my 5-year model is you have a certain amount of cash, and you can invest in an HMO with that cash. And if you get the right HMOs and do it right, and this is where you've got to probably go slightly bigger to get a slightly bigger variation in price, so you can recycle your money, but also get a cash flow, is that you could recycle that round several times. And if you're quick enough, after 5 years, I've calculated, I've done the model, which is, let's say you had 500K to start off with, you can have 500K back in your bank plus a 500K a year income.
Wow.
After 5 years. So the amount of money that you've got to start with, you can create if you're clever enough and quick enough and know what you're doing to do that. And that is a model now that I'm like doing for people. And it's like, that is pretty amazing.
That is.
That you can recycle that. But there is certain points that you need to do. And that's where, we started off with like Article 4 or no Article 4.
Yeah.
But actually, I think sometimes the question as an investor is it a 6-bed or is it a 7-bed or is it an 8-bed to how you recycle your cash? So to conclude around Article 4, we're both in favour of Article 4.
Definitely.
And I think investors novice investors, new investors are scared of Article 4, avoid Article 4, or only buy existing HMOs in Article 4.
Yeah.
And there's a whole argument of like, should I set my own up because that's a hassle, or should I just buy a ready-made one? Well, for me, if you want to recycle your cash and keep going and build that portfolio, you have to recycle it. You have to build it yourself. But if you only don't have much time and don't have the knowledge, then buying one ready-made is going to be far better cash flow than a buy-to-let. And again, there can be some bargains out there. Again, if you understand the financing, maybe you can refinance in a couple of years to a higher level anyway. But Article 4, non-Article 4, I think definitely Article 4. However, there is that little bit of an opportunity that's opened up on non-Article 4s to commercially value when you've got a 6-bed, 6-ensuite, and you don't have to worry too much about the refinancing. However, I'm going to underline all of that with the fact that really you should be striving for that slightly bigger HMO. The sweet spot is 6 to 7 to me. 7 in some areas needs to be done, because if you can squeeze that extra room out and you haven't got too smaller rooms, you have to note
they need to be good size to avoid voids. I'm fine. I'm looking at my clients' finances and the bank statements and stuff like that, and the ones who've got that small odd box room always seem to be empty. Always seem to be, and that's a killer. That's a killer. You need 6. You're spot on. 6, 7, fantastic.
6, 7, all good sizes with en suites.
Yeah.
Even better if you've got a bigger house and do the pot noodle stations and things. But that is where I think you want to end up. So in conclusion to this, I think you need to be careful which Article 4 you're going to. And I'd just like to add, to me, there's 2 types of Article 4s.
Yep.
There's the blanket Article 4, and then there's a selective Article 4. So I do some investing in Portsmouth. I've invested over the years in Portsmouth, and they were one of the first to move. And I was like, oh my God, no. But they blanketed it. And that meant there were still pockets that they were happy to have HMOs. So still you can produce an HMO in certain areas, student areas, streets are all clogged up with student HMOs.
PO2.
Yeah, some parts of PO1.
Yeah.
There's certain parts of South Sea, and therefore you won't get an HMO in that area.
Yeah. No point.
You go over to Southampton, a lot less of it. They didn't do a blanket. They were also one of the first lot to move, but they just, those pockets of student houses, they just Article 4'd them to stop any more.
Yeah.
And therefore, pretty much you've got no chance of getting an extra HMO, but you can do HMOs in other places. So the issue used to be, if you couldn't do 6-bed, 6-ensuite, you couldn't get them commercially valued unless you were going to sui generis. So that is one other thing to note, is whichever area you are, obviously going to 7 people in a house, that's going to be a commercially valued.
Guaranteed. Sui generis.
Sui generis, because you've been through the planning again. And therefore, that's another layer as well that you can overlay and do that anywhere. But ultimately, as you said, you need to have the tenant demand. You need to have a good quality product, in my view, to get these higher rents, because there's no point having like a 5-bed with magnolia walls these days, because you're just going to end up with very low rents. You're not going to get it commercially valued properly. And actually, bricks and mortar will probably be a better value for that.
Correct.
Anyway, so make sure you pick the right properties in the right areas, know what you're doing, but importantly, understand that valuation process in order to build that portfolio. And there is a methodology these days that, imagine you have saved a certain amount from your hard work, or some people borrow it for 5 years and hand it back at the end and then have an income of that amount. Because if you don't have to take any money out of it in the interim, you can keep refeeding it in. There is, I call it the HMO fiscal drag, because most people leave a little bit in, but hopefully the cash flow is high enough to repay that pretty quickly. And then if you do this rapidly enough and really push your HMOs through and buying the next one as you're doing the other one, you can squeeze it all in 5 years and almost get to that point that I was talking about.
I loved when you used to car park. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You used to have this one property being smashed up and put back together again, and you already had another property to move on to. And literally, your building team were going from bang, 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 from property to property.
Yes, and that's the way to do it. If you can get that volume going through, obviously recycled, then you can get to that position that I'm talking about. But it's like, you used to put them in the lay-by, didn't we?
Yeah.
And the article, the planning would be going through, and then we'd, that one's finishing off, and then sometimes we'd have to go to a 2-stage planning, because we'd go to the C3 to C4, C4 to SUIs.
Yeah.
These days, I think you can go. It's easier to go straight to SUIs, but even so, be aware of that.
Yeah, but there's pros and cons. I did like your strategy, and perhaps we should touch on that a little bit. How that in an Article 4 area, you got C4 planning first for 6. And then once you got, because a family dwelling is normally 4 people, in a family dwelling, maybe 5.
Yeah.
And then you're just increasing the density to 6 for C4.
Yeah.
And then you used to go back into planning. Then you used to go back into planning just to increase it to 1 more sui generis. And because each time you're only just increasing the density a little bit, you seem to got your planning through a lot quicker.
Yeah, I think there was
a lot easier. I
think there was the less objections, and some people, certainly when I was doing it, I go, I want to run up to 7. I'll put bang in the 7 application.
Yeah.
Loads of objections, goes to appeal, have to sit there, and you don't get what you want. Whereas I was more step by step with it.
Yeah.
Even though it was 2 applications, it made it work. Because I had that car parking system, I was kind of parking, going through the first one, and then starting the works, and then finishing off and getting that.
It was a lot more subtle.
It was a lot more subtle. Yeah. But also, what happened was as well, if I had a property going through kind of with a little bit longer on it, sometimes I'd buy it tenanted with a normal tenant, be switching it over, get the planning, then I'd get the planning, and then I'd send someone. Then it'd be like, well, I need the works value now, so I'd send in kind of buy it on a normal buy to let, then I'd switch it to a works value to help me fund the works.
That's it.
Because that's the other thing is now that certainly when I first started, it was really difficult to get development funding on a HMO. These days, it's fairly normal, and there's
I think we designed a few products, didn't we?
We did. I was like, I need this development funding. I need this development funding. It's a development. Come on, guys, it's a development. And also, I was going through planning, so it was. Yeah. It really genuinely was. So banks kind of caught up on that, and what that allowed me to do is like. Someone came along and then they would go, okay, well, what's the value today? Because this is no longer a property that is a C3. It has actually got permission for a C4. So that has intrinsic value in itself. There was a planning gain there.
Yeah.
So I could move it from, I'd then get a little bit more borrowing. So my original deposit that I might have put in, I'd get back out. And then they'd also lend me the money for the build. So that would help me. So I could almost recycle a small amount through the steps. Cost me a lot in finance, and obviously you were very happy. But but it allowed me to keep that volume going through the mechanisms. And that's the key, isn't it? It's just understanding how you can leverage the finance to your advantage to the best of your ability.
Correct.